Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining for the session. My name is Jamie Jacobs. I serve as Deputy Director at the Michigan College Access Network, and super excited to be talking to you today for just a short bit. And of course, taking any questions you have about submitting a proposal or a learning session, as we're calling them, for the 2022 MCAN conference. So hopefully this will answer most of your questions, ease any of the concerns or fears that you might have. Know that if you would like to have conversations after this session about ideas that you have, we'd love to talk to you about them. But also, I want you to feel good about what you think you have to share. If you think you've got something to share, we want to hear about it. So if you take nothing else from this session, know that that's my primary objective, is that if you think you're doing some innovative programming, some promising practices, or you've got some great ideas that are not fully fleshed out, but you'd like to share them and get some feedback on them, we want to hear from you on those ideas through this process. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the process. We're going to talk through some questions, the questions that you'd be asked to answer, the different style of sessions, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end for any questions you do have. I am solo on this session today, so if you do have any questions, it might take me just a second to get to them, but make sure to type any questions you have just into the chat panel on your user panel. So hit those questions into me and I will raise them and answer them as I can grab them. So just in case, I had mentioned the session's being recorded and we never know who's grabbing these things and what folks know about us. So we'd love for new attendees and new presenters to think about putting in sessions and to coming to the conference. So I want to make sure that folks who might be new to us or are newer to us are comfortable and understand who we are and what our mission is and the type of sessions and really the content of the conference that we'll be putting on in November. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and our mission is to increase college readiness, participation, and completion. So we're focused on that entire pipeline of sort of readiness, access, and completion and success. Obviously hyper-focused in Michigan, and we're particularly focused on the populations that are often receiving the least amount of support and have the most barriers systemically as they prepare, enroll, and succeed in post-secondary, and those are low-income students, first-generation college-going students, and students of color. We also have 4 belief statements that hopefully help folks understand who we are, how we access the language that we use, so that you can think about this work the same way that we do, at least as you're listening to us talk about our work. The first is that college is post-secondary education. We use those 2 terms interchangeably, and quite frankly, as you're talking quickly and you've got a lot of great things to say, college is a lot easier to say than post-secondary educational attainment. We use that term college, it's also in our name, to refer to the attainment of education beyond high school. That includes post-secondary certificates and degrees, so associate degrees, bachelor's degrees, and beyond. And we think it's really important to level that playing field. All of those post-secondary education opportunities have viable pathways after completion, and we want to make sure that students, whether those are traditional age students or adults, have the ability to really assess all of those pathways to understand their menu of options and see what might be the best fit for them. So we use the term college interchangeably with post-secondary education, which is a little bit of an outdated term, and college is a lot more accessible to folks once they understand what you're talking about. Our second belief statement is that college is a necessity. We know, in all data points to the fact that in a knowledge-based economy, which Michigan has transitioned to and has been in for over a decade now, that post-secondary education or college dramatically increases an individual's economic independence. We think that's important. It's important for folks to be able to access employment. It's also important to make sure that the employment and career opportunities that are afforded to folks provide a livable wage and a pathway to upward mobility and economic independence. Our third belief statement is that college is for everyone. You saw some pieces of this in that mission statement that I just talked towards, but we know that there are systemic inequities that perpetuate issues around all students having equal access and the support that they need to access post-secondary and to complete post-secondary. We work, and most of our work, the majority of our work, is focused on changing those systems, rebuilding those systems, dismantling and rebuilding them that we know perpetuate these inequities. And then lastly, we believe that college is a public good. Generally speaking, you can get everyone to agree that college is a private good. We would argue, which means it's good for individuals. So that piece around individual economic independence really plays to that private good piece. What we also know to be true is that there are all sorts of positive externalities connected to communities that are well-educated. So if you live in a well-educated community, whether or not you yourself are well-educated, you benefit by living in that community. Voting and volunteerism goes up, reading to your children, access to and participating in arts and culture activities, health outcomes like obesity and smoking go down, access to preventative health care and things like that all go up. So for all of those reasons and a ton more, depending on what you might want to talk about, we can talk to you about all sorts of those positive benefits of highly educated communities. At the end of the day, it is for those reasons that we would argue college, and we believe that college is also a public good in addition to being a private good. So I say all of that to say, if you're new to us, I want to make sure you've got a quick introduction to who we are. And if you're not new to us, I think it's always helpful just to reframe your thoughts as you're thinking about what might, in your work, what might make the most sense to talk about at the conference. Lastly, all of the work that we do is aligned with Michigan's goal of increasing the percentage of Michigan residents with degrees and post-secondary certificates to 60% by 2030. It's a lofty goal, but a necessary goal to make sure that we can meet labor market demands and also attract new businesses and retain current businesses in the state of Michigan. So let's talk more specifically here about the conference. So just in case you haven't heard all of the details, we're really excited about our 11th annual conference, which will take place this year for the first time at Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort in Mount Pleasant, fairly centrally located outside of Lansing. We're excited to be moving ourselves a little bit north, especially for our friends in Northern Michigan and the Upper Peninsula, and also to a pretty fancy place. So if you haven't been to Soaring Eagle in a while, they have done all sorts of new work and renovation, and the space is going to be really fantastic. Both the rooms for overnight accommodations as well as the event spaces. Our theme for the conference is doubling down on 60 by 30. Knowing, I imagine most of you on this call or listening to the recording are not. It isn't news to you that we have an enrollment crisis thanks to the pandemic, or maybe really exacerbated by the pandemic, an issue that sort of predated the pandemic that became incredibly prominent during the pandemic. And as we come out of the pandemic, as we move hopefully towards this new normal, and it's really important for us to be thinking about, as a state, as a network of stakeholders working on these issues, thinking about economic vitality of communities and of the state through this educational attainment lens, that we're thinking about what we can do to really quickly put promising practices into place at scale across the state and in communities with a limited amount of time to make sure that we can turn the tides here on enrollment and attainment outcomes. That's in communities, but also across the state. So we're excited about this theme and the urgency that we know we have to make sure we're supporting individuals and creating the structures and systems that will move the state, but also will move individuals down that path of economic independence. The conference will take place November 9th and 10th. Really excited to be coming together. That's a Wednesday and a Thursday as you look towards November. And we'd love to see you there, both as an attendee and hopefully as a presenter. So if you have never been to the conference, or you have, but you've never thought about it, or it's been a while since you've been with us in person, just wanted to let you know, as you frame your thoughts about your session, who you should imagine will be in attendance. Based on our prior 10 years of this event, we imagine we'll have approximately 500 individuals. We're playing with those numbers right now to make sure that we can invite as many of our friends as we'd like to be there, but also still have some COVID safety precautions in place, and that we're not putting too many folks too close together and without enough time to make sure we're doing our due diligence on cleaning and keeping folks at social distances. As you think about the individuals who will be in attendance, here's just a sampling of what you can imagine will be there. Educators from both K-12 and higher education, K-12 and higher ed administrators, community leaders, and community leaders is such a broad term. That looks like community-based organization and nonprofit leadership. It looks like philanthropic leadership, local government, business leaders from communities. You could also expect policymakers, both from communities locally, as well as state policymakers, and other college access professionals, often doing direct service oriented work. So think about that audience as you're thinking about what ideas you might want to share, but also how you might frame those to be the most helpful for folks. So let's talk a little bit about what's in the request for proposals, or RFP. A lot of times I find, as I talk to folks and they say, I've got an idea, I don't know if it's good enough, don't know what I'll say about it, I find they haven't even taken a quick look at what questions we're asking. We've done our best to not make the RFP longer than it needs to be. We're asking hopefully the necessary questions, and we're also character limiting you so that you don't feel the need to keep writing and writing and writing. So hopefully that helps pare things down for you so that you can really focus on the most important details of the content you'd like to share. So when you get into our RFP, and there's a link at the end of this proposal, we also have it linked right on our web that you can easily find. You'll see there are 3 steps we ask you to complete. The first step is to just tell us who you are. So we're going to ask you to tell us who you are, as well as any additional presenters that you have joining you. A few best practices that I would suggest is that you have no more than 3 presenters. It can possibly work with more than 3, especially if you have a panel style presentation, but just in the time that's allotted, we've often learned that 3 or fewer presenters really works the best for a 50-minute session. Also keep in mind that our primary communication will go to the first presenter. So that you will enter information first on the primary presenter, typically the person submitting the proposal, and then you will add additional. We will communicate most frequently with that primary presenter just to help them sort of us deliver that message to a dedicated group of folks for them to share with their co-presenters. So think about that as you're putting in you're deciding who's going to submit and you're putting in your presenters. Lastly, we get questions every year. What if we're not exactly sure? We think we know who's going to present, but a job changes, contact information changes, or we end up having to swap out one of our presenters. No problem, not a big deal. Don't worry about it in the short term. Get submitted what you believe to be what will happen in terms of the content, but also the presenters. And then once you hear from us in August about whether or not your session has been accepted, we'll confirm with you both your abstract, like what will be in print in the program, the title of your session, and the presenters for your session, to make sure we've got spelling right, we've got titles right, we've got organizational affiliations right. And that would be a perfect time for you to let us know if there's been any changes. So no worries on that front. Want to make sure to ease any anxiety on that. So that will be super easy. The second piece we'll ask you to do is really the meat of the proposal. And this is your proposal details. It includes all of the things you're seeing here. I think there's 8 questions that we ask, and we'll talk about each of them here briefly. Title is hopefully self-explanatory. One of the best practices I'll give you around title, both as you submit it to us, but actually more as you think about who you're attracting to the session, you both want that title to be attractive and fun, but you want to make sure that the title really resonates with the content and aligns with the content, sort of resonates with the audience, but also aligns with the content that you're going to talk about. Every year, we've got a few sessions that have really great titles, but don't necessarily well align with the abstract or the content of what the session is delivering. And we'll have folks that don't necessarily read the details as they're running around the conference, deciding what session they want to go to. And they're often a little bit disappointed if the title doesn't well align with what they thought would be the learning objectives or the deliverables. I mean, there's some shared responsibility there, but at the end of the day, as you're thinking about titles, you obviously want it to be you want it to resonate, be a little bit cute and fun, but also be really practical and well aligned with your content. The next thing we're going to ask you is about learning objectives. The learning objectives are just for us internally as our conference review committee thinks about what you'll be talking about. So what we're looking for here from you is 2 to 3 relatively well-polished learning objectives. What are you hoping the folks who attend learn or take away with them when they leave your session? This should be relatively easy. I often find it's easiest to think about the learning objectives first, which is why we've put them towards the top before you start to think about how you're going to talk to us in more details about what your session will look like, and then put together that abstract. The third question we're going to ask you is super easy. We're going to ask you to check a couple boxes, or at least one box. We'll ask you to tag your session to an issue area. So we've got a finite list of issue areas that are pretty comprehensive. I think there's about 11 of these issue areas, and there's some issue areas we'll talk about in a few slides that we're really hoping to prioritize as you submit sessions. My suggestion to you is pick the issue areas that actually make sense for your session. At the end of the day, it doesn't do you any good to tag it to an issue area, to tag it to more issue area tags doesn't make your application more competitive. It's how we'll categorize the sessions to also help people navigate them, and also help people who are thinking about registering to know what type of content might be available in the area that I specialize in. Maybe all of my work is focused around network development, or maybe all of my work is focused around policy change or DEI issues or adult completion. It's really helpful for me to see what type of content, if any, is going to be available in those areas. So no, that's typically how folks are using this information. We're not using it a ton in the review. It's really about once this goes live for folks to be able to think about what sessions might be best for them. Of course, we definitely try to diversify the issue areas in terms of the number of sessions that are there. And like I said, we've got a few priority issue areas that we'll talk about in a few minutes. The next piece is another quick, easy question. We'll ask you to select your session type preference. In a couple slides, I'll talk to you about the 2 session types we're offering this year. There's a traditional breakout session, and there's also a lightning lab. So more details to come on that, but the 4th question will just ask you to simply select which session type. If you don't know, reach out to us. Hopefully this session and a few slides will also help you, but feel free to reach out and say, hey, I'd love to talk with somebody about what session type might be the best fit. The 4th question, or the 5th question, is probably maybe the second most challenging. Tell us what you want to talk about. This is your opportunity to give a detailed description, a lengthier description. You've got 10,000 characters to work with here about what you'd like to talk about. Is it an intervention, a network development, a program, a community alignment? What is it that you'd like to talk with us about? Here's your opportunity to talk about what you'll discuss in detail. This is where you should share. We did this intervention. We had an evaluation. Here's what the success was. Here's how we'd love to share that information with others to scale it into their communities. The 6th question is the abstract. I think, to me, this is the most challenging. This is where we ask you to basically take those learning objectives and that detailed description and condense it into 3,000 characters or less, which is about 500 words, depending on how your style of writing. It sounds often like 500 words is a lot, but it really isn't that many words when it comes down to it. So we're going to ask you to take that detailed description and drive it down to something much smaller. The abstract, with some minor edits on our end, typically for grammar or clarity, is what we will produce and print in the conference communications, like the program or the app or a website. So it's really important, I would say, across all of these questions, but especially in the abstract, for you to be doing grammar editing, content editing, sort of editing for clarity on your end prior to submission, and no doubt those pieces will be considered in the review. The next question will focus on the vision for the session. Vision is a little bit of a lofty word that we use here. Really, we're talking to you about, there's a little subtext to this question when you go through the RFP. What do you think it feels and looks like, right? What style will you use? Will you have folks do discussion? Will it be mostly lecture format? Will you have a PowerPoint? Will you be using flip charts and doing active discussion? Will there be roundtables? What do you hope this session looks and feels like? That's what you're going to tell us there. And then the last question will ask you, talk to us about how this is aligned with that conference theme of doubling down on 60 by 30. So that's really the meat of the RFP. The third piece is the session logistics. We'll ask you just a few questions really to acknowledge if you plan to be attending the conference or not, just so we know. Yet that is not considered in the review, but we want to make sure that folks know we love you to attend the full conference, that presenters could just attend their session, but also if you plan to attend the full conference, you will need to register once it is open, right around August 1, and pay the full price to attend. We also want to make sure we know your availability. Every now and then presenters are not available for a particular chunk of time or a particular day over the 2 days, and we need to know that as well. And then lastly, we'll ask you what some of your needs are and to acknowledge some things like make sure you bring a laptop and things like that as a presenter. So that first part and the third part are super, super easy. You could do those in your sleep. The middle piece is the part you'll want to prepare for, and you'll want to think through. This hopefully gives you a high level understanding with a little bit of details how we look at these pieces and what content should go in those different questions. But know that you are able to go in and start and save your proposal. You do not have to go in and sort of type it all in and submit it in one fell swoop. You will create a login, you will go in, you could start, you could save, you could go back as it makes sense. You could also do some copying and pasting if you wanted to answer questions in like a Word document or a Google Doc to share across co-presenters. So I told you a few things were coming. One of those was the learning session types. Let's talk about that now. So at the end of the day, the choice really is yours to think about the type of learning session that you think your content is best suited for, or that you're quite frankly just most comfortable presenting in. We will offer this year 2 types of learning sessions. One, a traditional breakout session. If you've ever attended a large conference or even a smaller conference, this is what most breakout sessions look like. These will be 50-minute sessions that include Q&A. The vast majority of folks will do some sort of PowerPoint or Prezi or presentation with a projector, a screen, usually flip chart paper or whiteboard for folks to write on depending on their needs. But the delivery looks pretty traditional. We want to talk to you about a success or an intervention or work that happened, tell you how it went, and help you think about how something similar could happen in your community or in your organization. New this year is something we're calling lightning labs. If folks are sort of up with a lot of the trends that are happening over the last 5 years or so across conferences, they're all different styles of presentation types. We are not looking for a really specific delivery type during this. So you could use PowerPoint slides, you could not. You could have lots of words on each slide, you could have a few words on each slide. So we are not prescribing how you deliver during this session, but know that during this session, it would be a shorter session, 25 minutes in length, and that includes, 25 minutes in length, and that includes any time for discussion and Q&A. And you'll notice a call out here specifically around discussion. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just know that across both of these learning session types, rooms will have a mixture of classroom style seating as well as round. So if you're thinking about the room setup as you're thinking about your sort of vision for the session, as well as your selection of style, know that there'll be a mixture of that classroom style, sort of folks in chairs looking forward, as well as rounds, which does provide a little bit more of an opportunity for collaboration. Let's talk for a minute about why I called out this discussion piece in the Lightning Lab. What we're hoping the Lightning Lab affords folks is, one, if you have anxiety about presenting, you've never presented at a conference before, especially a statewide conference, but you think you've got an idea, but you're really not sure if that idea, like it's you've piloted it, it's not been fully implemented, or maybe it's not even fully baked, you know, it's sort of a half-baked idea that you've been kicking around, but you think it's really a promising practice. We'd love for you to think about submitting that idea, knowing that you could bring it forward to a group of folks who would also love to hear that idea and help you maybe move it more towards a fully baked idea through a discussion format. No, we don't want this to be a 25-minute discussion. We want to make sure you've got some content to deliver, but it could also be 10 minutes of content with some table time or some pair and share discussion. That could also work in a traditional breakout session, but is sometimes a little bit harder to make happen when you have a lot more content to deliver, or you feel the pressure of having a lot more content to deliver. The 25-minute sessions also hopefully will help folks think about ideas that maybe were piloted, but were not yet fully implemented, or maybe moving towards a place of scaling in an organization or in a community, and there just isn't the sort of depth and quantity of information yet to discuss or to talk about. So that might be another thing to think about for Lightning Labs. As I think about how we can help you think about this choice, we really, at the end of the day, want this to be your choice. We may give you feedback after it's been submitted about, you know, wow, it really seems like you've got more than enough content for a traditional breakout session, but really at the end of the day, want that choice to be yours. So how might you think about making that choice if you're struggling between the two types of sessions? Here are some of the questions I would consider if I were submitting. How much content or resources do I have to share? How much do I want to say? How much do I have to talk about? And often I will find err on the side of slightly more than you think. Typically, when you're passionate about an idea, you get excited about it in front of an audience of folks that are also really excited. What you think was really only 10 minutes of content turns into 20 slides, and you know 20 slides is going to take you at least close to 50 minutes. So so think for a minute about what you would like to share, whether that's content, learnings, resources. How much of it do you think you have? And really, what time slot makes more sense? Also think about style. So I talked a little bit about this discussion and feedback from other folks. Are you hoping to get that? Are you hoping just to answer folks' questions? If you're hoping to have more of a discussion, feedback, and thoughts on an idea that's evolving or scaling or forming, you might want to that sort of lends itself more to the style of the Lightning Lab sessions. Think about what you're talking about. Was it at full scale, or did you pilot something? Again, I think things that have been piloted that are looking to scale and getting some feedback, moving those ideas to bigger ideas likely makes sense for the lightning sessions, but it's not a deal breaker for a traditional breakout session either. Think about the size of the room. So I know a lot of times folks will say, I couldn't possibly present to a room of 100 folks. Well, I know that you could. Everyone can do that. We're happy to help you build that muscle. But if that's something you're thinking about, that you're holding close to you, and you're thinking, I would love to present at a statewide conference, but I'd like it to be to a smaller audience, the Lightning Labs will be a smaller room. And the traditional breakout session rooms will have some larger spaces. So the traditional breakout rooms will have between around 40 to 100 folks in those rooms. The Lightning Lab spaces will have maybe more like 25 to 30 folks in those spaces. So if you're really thinking about the size of the room, whether it's related to the content or just your own comfort, that could be a piece of what helps dictate which session style might be a better fit for you. And then lastly, how many presenters will you have? I would suggest that if you have 3 presenters or more, you definitely should be thinking about the traditional session. If you've got 1 presenter, probably 2 maximum, you might still think about what the content is and whether the lightning lab makes sense. But if you want 3 or more presenters, you're hoping to do a panel or have multiple speakers, I imagine that the session type that you should be most thinking about is that traditional breakout session, just to give you the flexibility of the time that you're no doubt going to need for those folks to have their time at the mic. So think about these questions if you're sort of stuck with, man, I've got an idea, I'd really like to submit it, but I'm not sure what session type. Think through these questions and hopefully they'll help you. If at the end of going through these questions, you still don't know, reach out to us. We're happy to help. Let's talk for just a minute about the review and selection, just to make sure you know. If you've looked into any of the content, you'll have seen this language. I talked a little bit earlier about the issue area selection. So we are particularly interested in a subset of those issue areas, just knowing the interest of our attendees and also our interest of pushing information into the field. So you'll see here 5 issue areas that are a subset of the total number of issue areas that we're particularly interested in seeing sessions around. So if you are thinking about multiple ideas, feel free to submit multiple proposals, but also you could use this as a filter. Does one or more of those ideas line up more closely with these issue areas of particular interest? It could be a reason to submit that proposal over a different, but don't think too deeply into this. If you've got thoughts and ideas, we'd love to hear from them. And then lastly, you'll see in these last five bullets, the other things we're looking at. What is going to be the interest to our attendees that we talked about on that first slide? Is it clear and can we understand what you would like to talk about and how you'd like to talk about it? When was it submitted? So know that the deadline we'll talk about in a minute is August 15th, but we also have a priority deadline that will give you early review and early access. And then we'd like to hear, we'll also review this based on its potential for impact and scalability into other communities or across other states. So as we think about the timeline, I just want to make sure you have these dates on your radar. So on June 9th, we opened up that request for proposals, and we have a priority deadline of July 15th. That priority deadline is to help get your attention before folks check out for summer. So if you've got ideas, you want to submit them, I suggest you submit them by July 15th. What we will do is a first round of reviews for priority submission review, and we will communicate back to folks that submit by July 15th by August 1st to let you know what your standing is, and if we've got any feedback for you to make any adjustments, if that might be the case. At the end of the day, the RFP is open until August 15th, and we would love to take any proposals through that time. So if you need to use that time, use that time. Don't rush for the 15th if that's not going to work for you. But if you are ready to go, no, we'd love for you to submit by that July 15th date, and you'll hear from us earlier. If you submit between July 15th and August 15th, still great, still super excited. You'll hear from us final decisions and sort of across the board, all final decisions will be communicated out by August 29th. So we've got a little bit of time here, plenty of time for you to ask us questions and for you to get your submissions in. So the last slide that I have for you today before the email for you to send us any questions is we'd love to hear from you. We'd love for you to submit a proposal. Let us know if we can help you think through that. Hopefully this was helpful information as you're thinking through those ideas. And this isn't the most friendly link to type out. We'll make sure that this PowerPoint deck is available. And also on our web under events, you will find the annual conference with a click into this link. But that is where you can submit a proposal. So I am right at time. I will hang out to take any questions. I haven't had any come in yet, but I will hold tight for any questions that come in. Thanks for joining me today for this session. Feel free to reach out to me directly, or we've got a special conference email. You'll see it here, conference@micollegeaccess.org, to make sure your questions can get funneled to the right staff member and get answered as quickly as possible. I hope all of you have attended. Do submit a proposal. Again, I can't say this enough. If you think you've got an idea, I bet we want to hear it. We do want to hear it. Let's make sure you get it submitted. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a happy rest of your Tuesday. And I'll hang out, like I said, for any questions. If you don't have any questions, feel free to sign off, but I'll hang out for just a few minutes for anybody who does. Thanks so much.